Hello, Culminators. Today we're going to be talking with the enigmatic, and you'll understand why I say that in a minute. Now you see him, now you don't. You'll understand that in a second as well. Eoin Lenihan. Eoin Lenihan is a pretty controversial guy. I don't know that so many people who listen to this podcast would find him all that controversial, but because he has been a very outspoken and effective critic and analyst of the Antifa phenomenon and all the phenomena connected with it, like my friend Andy No, he has been a target of a lot of cancellation and a lot of opprobrium, abuse. And we're going to use this opportunity to get to know him a little bit better and find out what indeed is so awful about Eoin Lenihan. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on, Rod, and thanks for that introduction.
I'm going to just tell the audience what I mentioned to you before we went on. You
Sure.
and I had a regular correspondence back when you were on Twitter regularly,
Yep.
going back a couple of years, and then you appeared all of a sudden. I don't know whether you DM'd me and said hi or whether I saw you in the stream. And I said, "Oh wow, you're back. Let's get you on the show." And that was all that God wanted, for us to connect through that medium, because they wasted no time in finding a way to get you unreinstated. Had the reinstatement been accompanied by any kind of message from Twitter before? I mean, I'm going out of chronological order here, but I don't want to.
Sure, but yeah, it was really interesting because I was allowed back on May 1st, which I thought was very fitting, May Day, considering the people who have worked so hard to get rid of me. But I was allowed back on for 10 hours, essentially, before the same mob, Antifa and some of their friends in the media, who had basically deplatformed me in 2019 after my research first came out. It was the exact same faces. It was as if nothing had changed, and they were just all over it again. And I was gone within 10 hours. Again, nothing controversial. Said the account Eoin Lenihan. I can go through the process of how I was banned, but Eoin Lenihan, it was a clean account, no marks. I had been allowed back. No funny business here. I haven't tried to sneak back. I took my punishment. I left the platform since 2019. I appealed, thinking, oh well, with this Musk business, who knows? Let's give it a go. And I got back on. They allowed me back on, and then as soon as the usual suspects sniffed me out, that was it. Gone again, straight away.
And do you have any idea of what they said you were doing that was new?
The current reason for being banned is evading permanent suspension. But They let me on literally 10 hours before. They overturned the ban. I haven't. It's the exact same account.
It's insane.
But I don't know. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on it as we go. But my feeling is that there's certain people who have friends perhaps within Twitter.
And I think management itself doesn't know what its future looks like, and there's a tug of war.
Correct.
Among different control and management and technology groups.
I think that's why I was let on, to be honest with you, right? I think that there was a lot of fear. A lot of people were thinking, there was a lot in the news about certain voices being suppressed. And then I believe that I got back on with a raft of others. There were other names that were allowed back on. I don't know him very well because it's outside of my scene, but there's a Dr. Zev Zelenko, yes. He was the COVID guy, right. Very high profile banning. I believe he was allowed on the exact same day. And so my feeling was, there was fear within, and they were saying, before the algorithms come out, maybe before Musk sniffs around in the shadows.
Who knows? All right, so let's now wind back. Tell us about your work, how you got interested in this work, and the Eoin story.
Yeah, so I'm Irish, you might have heard, and I live in Germany, and I've been here since 2007. I've worked in the international school system here. I did my doctorate in international education in the University of Augsburg. I had taught here in the international school for 3 years and then jumped over to the uni. And I was teaching there as well, teaching trainee teachers. Part of it, actually, the initial interest in extremism came from doing the doctorate. I was trying to draw up an internationally minded way to bring diverse communities together. I was looking at this corner of Ulm, the next biggest city. Well, actually the city, our city, where I was living. I was looking at a corner of that that's, what's to give you a fair example, a bit, I suppose it's not quite as bad as the banlieues in France, in Paris, but heading that way. We have very diverse population.
No-go zone.
Yeah, we're getting to that point. So that's where I made my focus point. And I was lucky enough to be able to spend time with a lot of Turkish and Russian gang members and things like that. And that's where I first kind of became, I got used to this scene in a very practical way. My way of always approaching these things as an educator is, okay, how can I fit, what are the roots of this? How can we fix it? That's, so that's where it began. And then in 2016, I was really beginning to enjoy this angle of the work. And in 2016, I applied for a position with what was then the Tony Blair Faith Foundation. They were looking for somebody to write up curriculum documents on how to prevent extremism or tackle extremism in the classroom, online violent extremism. That was, that brought a lot of my interests together. That's exactly.
Now at that time, when they said extremism, what did they mean?
Well, the Tony Blair Faith Foundation is going to be left-leaning, obviously. So what I think, I was probably naive, right? Because I had come from this, if I go further back in Ireland, I was an archaeologist. My father is an anthropologist, a storyteller.
Oh.
I grew up going straight to the source. If you see an issue, go straight to the source. If you want to get the true story, go straight to the source, literally. And that was the approach I brought to this with this tough area in Ulm where I was researching. And that's what I also thought you would bring to...
and you were fluent in German, obviously.
Yes.
I mean, a stupid question, but...
Well, back then I wasn't,
Oh, really?
Hand fuss, so you have to do it with hand and leg. You just bit here, bit there. But luckily, everyone here speaks English too. I mean, that I was allowed to be lazy. People here are phenomenal. But so my approach was very much this human approach. You just get in there, you talk to people, you try to understand people, you build a relationship with them. And I just assumed that on the online sphere, that can be done. I know you think there's these barriers, but if you look online, it's very clear, and understand how Twitter and Facebook works, and there's groups, and if you can get close to these groups, you can see how how these people tick. Try and build a profile of who's in these groups. So to answer your question, is the gentleman I was involved with at the Tony Blair Faith Foundation was a terribly open-minded man. He was wonderful. But I think the focus, like everywhere, is just on the right. There is no left-wing extremism as far as any of these large organizations are concerned. And I can talk about that later. In fact, not only does it exist, it's the lifeblood for places like the SPLC. If the SPLC does not have Antifa procuring doxes for them, for example, they don't have a job. They have nothing coming in. Right. They don't do it themselves. They're outsourcing that. But anywho, that these guys were interested in far right. So I went in that direction. I was interested in going, looking at what the far right scene on Twitter was like. And
this is the year now, what, 2016?
So I made my initial contact with them in 2016. They offered me a contract to write this. It was a verbal agreement. It fell through because the Tony Blair Faith Foundation underwent a huge change, a remodeling. Everything, I think, like 2016 was a bit like the Clinton Foundation. There was concerns, and I think everybody was just freshening up. And so they underwent a fish lift, and our project fell between the cracks. I kept in touch with this gentleman, however, lovely guy. And so I was communicating to him the entire time and saying, hey, I'm going to push forward with this. Maybe even if I have to do it myself, maybe down the line you guys can publish the work. And he was, yeah, that's great. So I then, I was initially interested, in 2017, there was a group called Gripers. And now there's gripers that still exist today, but they're not the same gripers. These are this Nick Fuentes. That's a whole different scene and a whole different, completely different, same name, different people.
Oh, really?
And I was fascinated by them. This was my first contact really with what some would consider far-right extremists. And I got in and I started looking, and two things happened. First of all, I had a huge revelation. First of all, these guys weren't really far right at all. Most of them were just guys who were having a laugh, and some of them were, of course, racist, and some were this, but there was no organizational structure. There was nothing there that you can, by any definition of extremist group, identify. You cannot label this group. But I found it fascinating. I got in, I made some interesting connections there. I saw it was what I expected. A lot of these guys were depressed. A lot had substance abuse issues. A lot were just locked out of the job market, came from historically impoverished areas, what you would expect to find. And that's where my interest was. And I was going, okay, now I can get these indicators. Let's see, how can we, stop these guys as teenagers falling into this path. But then I kind of realized that I wasn't the only guy looking around this scene. And I started quickly coming across Antifa and I started coming across some journalists and some Antifa who were openly stating that they were feeding information to journalists. But it was very clear that their reason for being there was not my reason for being there. My reason to be there was figure out why did we get to this point? How can we fix it? Whereas theirs very clearly was provoke, push, and let's get something out of this. Let's get clicks out of this. Let's sell this. And I found that deeply, deeply disturbing. I found that really troubling. And so by 2018, I gave a talk at the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung in Berlin. And that was a talk kind of on my initial, I had nothing down in paper, but it was my initial findings, just kind of looking into the scene. And I talked about left and right and basically the absence of a left and how—
At this point, you're a completely independent researcher.
Yeah, no doubt.
No one's funding you. You don't have
nothing.
Yeah.
All me. And so why I was
I'm going to ask you a question that might come across as personal, but I think it's, if I were conspiracy minded, I would want to know, how were you making a living at that point? Because I'm assuming, if I'm Antifa, okay, if I'm a disinformation agent,
yeah.
So, okay, so at this point, Owen's being supported by the CIA, or by the Groypers or whoever it's supposed to be who does this stuff. So what are you doing? Selling schnitzel? What?
Yeah. So I was working at this point doing my doctorate. I was still doing my doctorate.
You're still on a fellowship.
I was doing it in the University of Oxford. No fellowship. I was working there. I was teaching seminars, and that was my income. Whatever I made from there, very modest. Very, very modest. Yeah. But that's what I was doing to support myself during that.
Okay.
And that was the first thing they went after, actually, unsurprisingly. But that was it. Everything I was doing was out of interest. And it was also so I was blogging a lot on education at the point. I had a very long running blog at this point. By 2016, I was beginning to see, we're seeing a major shift here. We have Donald Trump coming in and we have Brexit coming. But what I saw again was the reaction in the teacher community. And there was a lot of vitriol. There was a lot of anger. There was a lot of, and I went, this is dangerous. This isn't so good when we have our school teachers. And I could clearly see how it was tipping over. So a lot of it came out of my personal interest. I didn't need to be paid for this because it affected my profession as a teacher directly. Again, I could see where all these lines just again started intersecting. As again, the extremism was coming into my classroom. Teachers were being radicalized, for Christ's sake, at this time.
But in which direction? Which extremism? And how are they being radicalized?
Well, I would say from some of the stuff that I saw, teaching is an inherently left-wing profession. That's just how it is. That's always been that way since I've been alive, and it's increasingly so. And the statistics show that as well. That whereas even I think 10 years ago, the vast majority of university educators and teachers identified as center-left. Now we're gone to almost no conservative, and we're pushing into far left. But I was seeing a lot of stuff at the time about it was really where it was kicking off 2015-16, a lot of this talk about I can give you a personal example, for example. So I went to England when I was in 2005. That's where I initially wanted to study my doctorate. I had a terrible time. I had a lot of bad luck, but I faced a lot of discrimination for being Irish as well. I had a lot of staff, I had a lot of people on the street abuse me because of my accent. There was a lot of this paddy haha that you think would be long gone.
Yeah, you would.
Whatever, no problem. But and I saw a lot of the other side. Then I laughed. So my first introduction to real race and race problems was England, because I had this where I remember my very first day in England. I got off a bus. It was Reading University. I wanted to get to the university. I wanted to ask a guy. I got off the train, I should say, and I asked him, "Hey, where's the bus to the university?" And he stopped me at, "Can you tell me?" I didn't get past "can you." He said, "Why don't you fuck off back to your own fucking country, mate? When you can speak English, come back, blah, blah, blah." And I had to laugh. I said, "Is this a 1970s skit, like, Well, whatever, push on past it." But within that same week, I was walking home from campus to my accommodation, and I had a car full of, I was later able to find out through the chip shop owner that it was Pakistani youths who swung their car around and rolled the windows down and go,
the term in the US, in the UK is Asians. They were Asians.
Everyone's Asian, but yeah, correct. And you're a white C word. And I had to laugh because I was going, where do I fit in here? I'm a paddy to these guys, and I'm a white. But the point being that it was a crazy time. But to get to the point, I told this story one day on Twitter. Because, I'm not one for self-pity. A lot of Irish people, you realize that if you wallow in your past, it's a dead-end street, and we have plenty to wallow in. I think
Irish, sure.
You're Jewish as well, right?
Yes, as you were telling this story, I was saying to myself, I don't want to slow him down, right? Yeah. Well, listen, when my mother's family came from Poland to Cuba in the 1930s, they were called Polacos. Well, if they had been Polacks, they wouldn't have had to leave Poland.
This is the thing.
It's the exact story.
So you understand.
Right.
And so we're then in this point where people were talking about how only white people can be racist. That's where we're getting up to 2015 in the education scene. A lot of teachers talking about this. I told my story, and somebody said to me, a teacher, "No, that wasn't racism. That was bigotry. You can't be racist towards you." And I go, so if somebody gets, is talking to me, I feel like terrible. I feel threatened. I was called a paddy bastard. I feel no, that can't. You can't. It's not possible. So for me, again, you'll understand this with your heritage and background. Me as an Irish person, 600 years colonialism, the whole spiel, blah, 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 blah. I said, sorry, I'm not buying that. I'm not buying that. That racism is racism. Anyone can be, anyone can receive.
They're really anti-picked.
Yeah. Yeah, anti-picked, that's right.
I mean, it is so like what, these people don't even have a definition of race, because that would box them in. All it means is whoever we want to abuse.
Correct. That's what it is. And I want to clarify that, I have no hard feelings against England, English, anything like that, because again, forget it. It's
just second generation skinheads, the punks, really,
Yeah, that's it. It's just, and you have to let it go off your back, or else you're going to live a life of misery, right?
Right.
But so then this was around the time in education where this Ibrahim Kendi and all of this stuff is getting very fashionable, and only white people can be racist. And I start seeing this getting into curriculum. On Twitter, I actually ran a lot of education chats and things for other educators. I got a huge amount of educators and students in my university program onto Twitter. And so I've been a great ambassador for Twitter. It hasn't been returned, but anyway, I was able to see how a lot of this modern progressive thinking was getting into the classroom, and I had alarm bells pre-2015. But then once Trump gets into power, once Brexit, people lose their minds. They just lose their minds. And so you can make a choice at that point to get angry about it or have a laugh. I tried to have a laugh. I believe about my comedy. I had a comedy channel at one point, Progressive Dad TV, where I would just make fun of all these tropes, but that wasn't allowed. So again, they came after that, and I said, well, what can I do here? If I'm not allowed to make fun of authoritarianism, wherever it is, what can I do? Okay, well, I guess let's be serious. Let's
ask Gavin McInnes. He's not allowed to do anything.
I know, stop this. It's insane. It's insane. And I should point out, Gavin was interesting because talking about extremism and Twitter, but I mean, all the Proud Boys could be seen as is a direct mirror to Antifa. And look at how that was handled, how one morning, boom, all Proud Boys go, but Antifa. I mean, if we look at it from, say, you know, a CVE counter violent extremism perspective, they are the exact same thing, but Twitter has shown a clear bias in favor of one against the other. And that, how do you think that's going to end up? It brings me back to the journalists I was beginning to see in these chat rooms. I would see how they would poke and prod, and then I would see how their Antifa friends would dox and harass. And I said, how do you think this is going to end up? This person, you're going to eventually push somebody so close against the wall that they're going to have two options: hurt themselves or hurt somebody else. I mean, what you're doing is insane. And that's, again, so back to my approach, which was naive, that I thought I could help. Please, sorry, Ron, I was in the middle of a rant. Can you put that up again?
Oh, you know, I thought you would see it. Look, let's see it with one eye.
Yeah, right.
The story. Right. This is what you just finished describing.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. I mean, and I mean, you can put over that dude's head. You can put HuffPo, Daily Beast, SPLC, you name it. I mean, they are, from what I saw. And first, I tried to back off it because I went, I don't know if I want, that's a bit heavy. Like, you know, I thought, I don't know if I want to get that deep. But and I was this very middle of the road, good boy. You know, I did all I should have done. I played the game always. I was a good teacher. I was a, you know, and I didn't want to rock the boat. But I could see these guys are causing unbelievable damage and playing such a dangerous game by pushing these people to the wall. I mean, and again, for clicks, it's so cynical.
Well, was it only for clicks, though? Because that's actually a much milder accusation than other accusations you could make. And I think that would be borne out by your research and that of Andy Ngo and Jack Posobiec, which is that the clicks are incidental, and I mean, the accreting influence is super important. But the idea is they are on a mission. It's all part of what they accuse, of course, what they accuse you and I of doing right now.
Yeah.
Is very much part of a deplatforming, Overton window moving, you know, exclusivizing, cancelizing, you know, process by which certain points of view and people who espouse them are deemed permanently non-people.
If I can just, again, I can show that very clearly, because, and I'm nobody, right? I'm just a guy who had no profile, nothing. And this has happened to thousands of people. So it's the same story, but I could. So when my article comes up, if we fast forward there, that basically I got interested in. I had initially been interested in studying the far right. I saw, wait a minute, this is complicated. I was very naive, and I said, I did my presentation in Berlin about the far left and the far right. And I fell in after the conference with a gentleman who was with the Bundesamt für Verfassungsschutz. So they're the protection of the Constitution. That's what it literally translates to. Basically, they track extremism. And this guy happened to be tracking left-wing extremism. And I obviously thought, whoa, this is the first time I had met somebody who was interested in this. And he was studying Antifa in Germany. This very, very, very interesting guy. And I thought, hey, let's build a bridge here. I mean, the right wing of what I saw was so toxic, scary when you see the people involved, the people with power involved, and there's so much money being thrown at it by universities, by government. It's saturated, totally oversaturated. The demand far outweighs the supply. It's insane. I said, this is a mess, and it's an unethical, dangerous mess. And I said, all right, let's have a look. This guy, we had a great chat. So that's where I got into looking at Antifa. And I went and
now at that stage, okay, Antifa is really a phenomenon that is born in East Germany.
Absolutely. They had in the Weimar period, they came out of the Stalinist Communist Party. They're street fighters. At that point, literally every party had a street fighting faction. They were literally the street fighting faction of the German Communist Party. They survive up through various iterations past the world wars, and they come to America more with an anarchist perspective than that initial communist one in Germany, Weimar Germany. But I start studying these guys, and so I said, well, let's put together something that we all have a feeling, for example, like what I had seen, the journalists, for example, well, are they just cheerleaders or are they Antifa? What's going on here? There's a lot of, I said, let's just try and clean this thing out. Let's try and get a statistical kind of overview here. And so what I did was I gathered up all the following of 16 core Antifa accounts. And then I created this huge database of 60,000 Antifa accounts on Twitter. Whittled this down to the 2% most connected. And within that, this most connected 2% of Antifa on Twitter, there was over 20 journalists and, blue tick verified journalists with national profiles. And in that, it's a who's who from the New Republic to Politico to SPLC, HuffPost, and so on and so on. And this is where then I published this finding and it just explodes. And these guys just go for me and have been ever since. They're still going for me. Sure. I should say that article, it passed peer review. It's a very slow process. And yeah, thanks. That's exactly the initial article. And I mentioned it in there that it's undergoing peer review. And it passes peer review. Jack Posevich, fair dues to him, he tweeted it out, and immediately within the week, there's a hit piece that includes both his name and my name. It's an article about how the far right is abusing Twitter's new rules and blah, blah. But I'm randomly name checked after all this time. If you look at who writes the article, it's Hannah Gaish, who works for Michael Hayden, who's one of the people in the initial article. It's her fiance, who's writing this hit piece, to try and shut down the report, overshadow it by saying, hey, he's a bad guy. He's a right-wing guy. Don't read the research. And again, once I get on Twitter, just there out of the blue in May again, and I mention it, suddenly, boom, cut again. I have no profile again. So they've worked very hard to try and suppress the information. I should mention again, I mentioned Michael Hayden of the SPLC. There was a hit piece put out by the Columbia Journalism Review that got a lot of traction. That again, written by his good friend. But more importantly, the editor behind the scenes is Michael Thielman, who is a very good friend of Hayden and who worked on project with him, which is basically an Antifa tactic of doxing. So he wrote an USINT article for journalists, on how to employ Antifa tactics in your journalism. So again, Hayden, what it showed me is just how viciously these people go after you and how they'll abuse their credentials. What that essentially is Michael Hayden asked his friend and his colleague's fiance to write hardcore hit pieces. They're just a clique of far left activists, but they use the credentials afforded to them by their publications, which carry serious weight, to crush me. And that's happened to, you name it, Gavin, you mentioned, name McGuinness, time and time again. I'm not alone, but it's shocking when you see how it's put into process.
Well, it's a remarkable testament to the work that you, as a so-called nobody, because look, Gavin had a profile. Gavin was a guy. He was on Fox News. He was he founded the Proud. He was a real guy. So he had to be destroyed, and it. You said something before. You said the Proud Boys are a mirror to Antifa. I didn't want at that time to stop you in your flow. I'm not the lawyer for the Proud Boys, but I will say, not their record of official Proud Boys related violence couldn't hold a candle to Antifa.
Can I clarify that as well there, Ron, because it's a very good point.
Yeah, please do.
When I say that they're a mirror, I should have clarified, because they're absolutely not in terms of the violence and extremist mentality. What I mean is that if Antifa had been kept in check by social media accounts and by society, politicians who are emboldening and enabling them, then there wouldn't have been a reason for the Proud Boys to exist. That's what I should have said.
Exactly. Okay, please. So now, they decide. So this article was so devastating, and because remember, I don't have to tell you, but remember, listeners. What Eoin has said here is he didn't go undercover, and you now have to believe him, or get a bunch of interviews and you have to believe the people he spoke to, who are unlikely to be identified. like in a Washington Post or a New York Times or a
Right.
Vanity Fair article. All Owen did was log onto Twitter, like anybody in any free country can do anytime, and collect receipts and connect dots. And when he was done doing that, he had found people who would appear to have some interesting and important relationships and who are also involved in shaping public opinion.
You don't have a voice to come back and make your points, you know. And I was saying that Gavin, he knows this better than anyone, that they get to paint you in public, then they get to say who this guy is. And the point you made, which was very good, is what I saw when all of these news companies came down on me, and they're not news companies, they're a couple of guys at Click who are just saying, hey, you write this, you to smear and to ruin you. But it's all ad hominem. They just go after your reputation. They just say Nazi, right wing. What you said was that, and I'm very proud of, is nobody has been able to disprove this research. Nobody has been able to take it down. That's why every time something about this comes out, there's a hit piece and it's all Nazi, who this guy's bad. And sorry, that's what led me to that point, which Gavin can understand, is the worst thing when you're not on Twitter is you don't have a platform to defend yourself, and you don't have a platform to clear your character. You don't have that platform. I'm a regular center of the road guy. I'm largely apolitical, but if politically, I'm very much a centrist. But if you are to read any of the trash on blogs and all going around about me, I mean, an employer, think of friends, family members, if they read this stuff, and you're just given once you're off Twitter, you just don't have a platform. You just don't have a platform to defend yourself.
And the longer you're off Twitter, the more that's seen as a confirmation of your illegitimacy.
Absolutely. Take, for example, Sam Thielman, the guy who orchestrated this Columbia Journalism Review hit piece. I out of interest last night, I was thinking about this interview and I just looked, what's this guy doing now? He's got a Substack and he does he's got like a Twitter channel with very few followers about comic books. Yeah, great. Good for you, Sam Thielman. You get to go on and live in anonymity, but that hit piece you put out about me stays forever. You know, I assume CJ, the Columbia Journalism Review, figured out quickly that, hey, this guy's an activist, let's get rid of him. But the smear remains on my name, and particularly so because I'm not on Twitter. And again, that's why I want to thank you for having me on here today. It really means a lot.
Well, you're welcome. I think it's great to be able to get your story all at once and all in one place. And as you're telling it, I'm remembering now as it was taking place, and I would catch it in snatches. But I saw what happened. When I started, I do a very small amount of research before each interview. I wish I could say that there was a principle to being lazy, but there's just being lazy. Your name, the SEO concepts that come up when doing search for your name are all linked to, these routine words of opprobrium, far right. Or they call you scare quotes around researcher, and there's no accountability. There's no recourse. And they say, oh gosh, well, hey, go on Truth Social, go on, go on Parler, talk to the other, talk to the 40,000 people instead of the 40 million people you were talking to before. That's a good substitute.
Right.
But this is old news. We knew this already. I do think in your case, the really fascinating bullet points are, you come out of nowhere. You haven't developed some right-wing vision, again, using the comparison to Gavin McInnes, who already had been known for having called himself, he had coined this phrase, Western chauvinism. So he's already saying, look, I'm a reactionary. That's what I'm going to sell here.
Yeah, he's edgy comedian. Yeah.
Right. But you're just this guy, this Europeanist, traveling between Ireland and Germany over the UK. I mean, that actually makes you suspect of cosmopolitanism you know, and working, you know, an academic where you're, in other words, you're in the belly of the beast, and you know, and then you do this research based on unimpeachable empirical information about who's doing what on social media, and you're taken down like public enemy number one.
Yeah.
And you come back on Twitter for 10 hours and someone sounds the alarm and they push you back down under the water.
Yeah.
It's and so, you know, yes, it's a story worth telling. Quillette has given you a platform. They occupy kind of a strange place.
Yeah, you're right. And it's changing here.
But, you know, I don't think the answer is, well, we have Quillette, we have, you know, and we have Getter, and, you know, in other words, there are little ghettos that we can establish and say what we want to say to people who don't really need to be convinced of it at this point anyway. Now in Europe, you know, people, you know, we forget that Twitter is an American thing. They don't have the First Amendment there.
No.
On the other hand, they're not, because for this reason, governments are not shy about getting involved in the content regulation business. And I recently spoke to the famous Count Dankula.
Oh yeah, sure.
You know, who has not been banned from social media, strangely enough, but actually experienced something that we as Americans can't conceive of, which is he was arrested for making a tasteless Holocaust joke. But I can tell you the number of Jews, including people like me who are from Holocaust survivor families who make tasteless Holocaust jokes, we'd be in camps again, okay? There's one right there, ladies and gentlemen. I better stay out of the UK. So
again, if you come from hardship, dark humor is, you know, it's essential.
Yeah, but boy, you know, if the Irish didn't exist, the Jews would have had to invent them. You know, because you guys at least keep us honest on the self-pity scale.
That's funny.
Owen, you've been so forthcoming, and you've told us, you know, I think it's merely enough for us to get everyone up to speed on you. Yeah. What else can we communicate?
Could I just, you're making your point there about the difference between here and America. And
yes.
One of the nice things, and we do have a lot of restrictions here in Germany in particular, but after that, Emily Gorchensky was mentioned in that article. And
after which? After the Columbia Journal? After your Quillette stuff. Okay.
And she's mentioned in the article that's past peer review as
well.
Oh,
you mean the 2019 article?
Correct.
The original atom bomb that you dropped.
Yeah.
Okay.
So just to show you again how, like you said, exactly, an atom bomb, and just how everyone comes down on you, and you can think, oh my God, I'm done here. I've really messed up. Whatever. Well, she sued me here in Germany and lost. It's official by German standards that she is an Antifa doxer, as I stated there. So again, you know, I know these stuff, but I don't have the platform to push out. No, sorry, you can't. You know, all of the lies that are stated about you on social media, I can't say no. Here are the facts. And again, when I got back for that 10-hour window, I managed to put up the article quick and say, peer-reviewed. Hey, this is great. And my friend in the SPLC states that's a paid for thing. Lol. Again, he can just lie. So blasé. But again, with the weight of SPLC, those letters, you know, who are you going to believe? This nobody or the guy? You know, and I'm saying that not as a pity thing for me, but there are so many people who have been cancelled and haven't, and just it's cathartic to be able to say out, hey, and thank you. You know, really, thank you.
You know, I never know if any podcast will be my last. But that's the way to go, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, it's made a difference to me, Ron. A big difference. Thank you. Because it's a way to carry that around for 3 years, knowing just how ugly this was and how people perceive you. It's just being allowed to tell the truth, get it out there. It makes a big difference. Thank you.
Well, you're welcome. What do you see going forward? For you, let's assume more of the same, but do you see anything to give you any hope?
Well, the Musk business is the biggest thing right now, right? I mean,
Right.
That's everything.
Right.
It's everything. It's either he's going to take that over. I hope it's not just I mean, if he pulls out, and sure, even if he gets $1 billion, that's a win for him. Great for him. But this is, it doesn't affect a regular Joe. More importantly, it doesn't affect society. That's like Twitter has a massive effect. Twitter is still where news is made and still where consensus is formed and driven. And so he has to push through with that, and he has to sort out the mess that's there. I mean, I really hope he does.
I really hope he can. I mean, it's an interesting thing. They voted a poison pill, and then they realized that would expose them to, incredible liability, because it's obviously the poison pill was not in the interest of shareholders. But I don't know whether they realized it or didn't realize it. I assume they didn't. What I think is clearly coming across as a knowing misrepresentation about the extent of fake accounts on Twitter is a built-in poison pill.
Yeah, right.
And the difference of this poison pill is that while a poison pill does tend to is at least prima facie to the detriment of shareholders, because it says we won't let merely a high share price deprive us of control, and it's for your long-term benefit, shareholders. If in fact Twitter has been misrepresenting metrics to advertisers and to the SEC, that is a real problem. That is a real problem, and that's going to be fascinating to watch.
Well, if he doesn't take over, a total collapse, be it total collapse or have to start from the bottom up, equally good.
Yeah, I mean, I think that he has certainly already had a major achievement, both on several major achievements. One is the acting as an agitator, and upsetting the apple cart there. But he has elevated his voice. A person who had been an icon of the left in general. I'm not talking about Antifa. I mean, they tend to be nihilistic.
No. Clean energy and all of these ideals. Yeah.
Right. Sort of a Steve Jobs type of figure. And then he gets into the muck and sees what's really going on, and doesn't only say, even Jeff Bezos in the last couple of months has come out with some astonishing tweets.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
But Musk says, not only am I going to start calling things out that I'm seeing, I'm a Republican now.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And the only way you can do that in his world is to have genuine FU money. But that's what he's got. That's what he's got.
You're right, though. He's shifting.
Owen,
just having the courage to say it out loud.
Yes, right. I mean, we were talking before about this idea, about this tug of war and these battling constituencies within Twitter, and now in the all of which has been thrown into great relief, and to a large extent elevated by the Musk business. And people often ask me, well, actually, I tweeted about a week into this. I said, if you work at Twitter and you think this would be a good time to start deleting files, I really would recommend against it, even though I'm sure you think you've got good reasons for it, because all of this is amenable to being, forensically recreated, and it's just going to make things worse. It is no question that the atmosphere, the workings of the algorithm, the engagement on Twitter, and you're off Twitter, so you're not experiencing it so much yourself, but certainly for those of us who are on the higher end of followers, it was alive for 2 or 3 weeks in a way that it had not been for 5 or 6 years. It was really something but I just find it amazing to think, and so then they put you back up, and then they take you back down, don't they realize that they're making a record there also? I mean, you just wonder, but who knows? I mean, you've never really had any interaction with Twitter people, right?
Well, no, never, no. But it is interesting, right? So there's two things there that are definitely fishy. It's like they turned on the faucet for the conservative support. It would appear, whether they were conservatives rushing in because of Musk, or whether they had been throttling accounts. That's one thing exactly we're going to see. The other thing is, yeah, this rush of people like me who are let back on, and even if we were banned again, that would suggest that maybe they're kind of, you know, those people who have that, who are maybe manually banned, or those people who are banned for ideological reasons are being allowed on, and they're trying to cover that up. I'll tell you what I'm very interested in is, I think, so what the research that with Quillette and now what's been peer reviewed is, I've clearly identified the pipeline from Antifa to journalists, national press. I cannot wait to see if we can establish that pipeline from Antifa to journalists to insider Twitter. And my suspicion is it's there. Can we prove it?
No question whatsoever.
Well, maybe, Ron, that's where you come in with you guys. If there's, you know, with some of these,
if one of our lawsuits against Twitter withstands the contortions that our judiciary will go through to avoid ever letting anyone proceed in a lawsuit against Twitter, then I mean, the extent of those contortions, I can tell you stories from other lawyers about just how crazy and inexplicable some of the things are on that score. And also SPLC, you know, our case on behalf of Gavin McInnes in Alabama has been sitting there for 3 years now. The judge has 3 years. The judge has not ruled on SPLC's motion to dismiss. That's right. Nothing.
How can they hold it up?
There's no accountability. He's sitting on it. The judge is sitting on it. And the real question is how this judge in a district with 6 judges, of which he is the only liberal, all cases against the SPLC end up getting assigned to him. It doesn't sound like the operation of a random assignment system.
No. Another place where you and I intersect there then on this, the gentleman that harassed me works for the SPLC, and you know, I was banned like that. My feeling is that he has an insider. That the SPLC, of course, did work with Twitter quite closely there for a period, and that was short. Is there? I don't know if that's an area you're going to be looking into in the future.
I hope we have the opportunity. It's something that I've been very aware of for a while. And yeah, it's very real. And, you know, we have to stand up and be counted. And I thank you for doing that as well.
Well, you're doing it.
It's history. We're really watching history live. And there are a lot of people who really want history to stop. Yeah. They want the existing order, and, you know, people who, it's just so ironic to me that people who paint themselves as radicals are absolutely part and parcel of the globalist corporate system.
Correct.
And what I wonder is, you know, when is that going to come home to roost? When it, you know, what is it all a game, or is it just? Yeah, I just don't know. I don't have the answer.
Can I say one thing as well? And it's, you know, because there are different solutions, right? This is so complicated that my wish for, you know, not to sound too wishy-washy or anything, is that I would love to see the same, just courage. That's all you're doing here, is showing courage in all of your work, how you just stand and just tell truths. I would like to see all across the media. I want to see more of that. I want to see conservative media just have that strength, that backbone to just do what you're doing. Just tell, you don't have to be on the attack, but just defend reality, defend free speech, the basics.
Well, you look at people like Glenn Greenwald, man of the left, and with whom I have had so little in common until fairly recently, and I really couldn't stand him because I felt that he was so reflexively anti-Israel and blaming the CIA for everything. And all of a sudden, so much that he said, except I think on Israel, where he's absolutely blinkered. And I'm not blinkered, believe me, but I'm the other direction. But I think that, you know, there's nothing they can do right in his eyes. But the point is, here's a guy who gave up his role in The Intercept, which he had helped found, and you know, he has a certain cushion. He has a reputation, but there are people who have really paid the price. And he's not a there's nothing conservative about Glenn Greenwald whatsoever. No. But there's nothing right to
universal principles
in the West right now in 2022. There's nothing more reactionary than the left.
Yep, for sure. For sure.
Owen, thanks again. Well, I hope we'll talk soon.
It was a pleasure. Thank you, Ron.
You're welcome.